Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel, bringing you easy listening, comprehensive lore for the world's greatest role-playing game. Today, let's delve into the religion, origin, history, ecology, and society of orcs. While the overall concept of orcs draws on a variety of pre-existing mythology, the word itself can be traced back to the 16th century, the modern conception of the creatures stems from the Lord of the Rings. In Tolkien's books, orcs are a brutish, aggressive, malevolent species and generally serve an evil master. Tolkien's concept of orcs has subsequently been the basis of a lot of fantasy fiction, as well as the role-playing and strategy games like Dungeons & Dragons, Warhammer, and Warcraft, again broadening the lore of the creatures in modern culture. Of course, today we shall look specifically at the orcs of the Forgotten Realms, with a brief note here and there on the other D&D settings. When the gods arose from the astral sea and fought for control over the primaterial plane and its worlds, the battles against the tremendously powerful primordials was a losing fight, until the gods of Toril summoned the gods of other realms, other realities, to get involved and tip the conflicts known as the Dawn War in favour of the beings who mortals would call the deities, those who are bound by the overgod Ao and the tablets of fate. One such group, or pantheon of gods, who arrived to tip the battle was the Orcish gods. Grimms One-Eye, the greater god of storms and war and of orcs. He is the leader of the orc deities. His priests wear blood red, sport eye patches, or actually gouge out one of their eyes. They go into battle in plate mail and great helms. His sacred animal is the giant rat. In orc lairs, blood sacrifices to him usually occur during the nights of the new moon. His most faithful are called Grumans, and believe he never had two eyes, while the owls tell a tale that one of his eyes was destroyed by Corellin Lorathian in a battle. Most orcs hotly contest this propaganda. The most sacred day for Grumans is called Garfectaz, or Feast of the Bloodied Stones, which takes place on the last day of the month of Leaffall, the month of Marpenoth. It commemorates Grimm's mastery over the plane of Nishrek. That is also the day that all new shamans must pass a ritual of torture and sacrifice that the whole community gets involved in. The dictates of Grimms are follows: gather, breed, and flourish. Rise up in hordes and take anything you need. Raid, kill, and conquer. Luthik, lesser goddess of fertility, medicine, and orc females, the consort of Grimms, is by no means a lesser god to the orcs, and particularly the Orogs. She is known as the Cave Mother and the Mother of Bagtru. Her sacred animal is the cave bear. Her symbol is the orcish rune meaning home. Luthik embodies the orcish feminine ideal, subordinate to male orcs, but still fiercely protective of orcish society. Luthik is described as a matronly orc with very long claws. She fights barehanded with her claws because only the males of the community are allowed to wield a weapon. She also uses powerful spells, as such arts are not considered manly in orcish culture. Most outsiders see the savage side of orc culture. They rarely see the deep bonds of family and tribe that bind orcs together. Even if, by the standards of civilized people, these tribes are brutal, stark, and severe, they have been moulded by thousands of years of harsh climates, poor resources, hard survival choices, zero tolerance for burdens on their community, and the constant competition of goblinoids, civilized races, and the animal kingdom. And monsters, of course. Ilnival, lesser god, a cunning war leader, inspiring great loyalty in his followers. He is very diligent in planning his strategies for victory. He is considered the patron of orc crossbreeds such as Orogs and Tanaruks. Although the reverence of Grimms is responsible for periodically issuing forth the call to summon the Horde, it falls on the faithful of Ilnival to marshal these fractious tribes into a united horde against a common foe. Clerics and adepts of Ilnival pray for their spells at dusk in preparation for the night's battles. The Church of Ilnival observes few holy days other than a token of obedience to these honouring Grimms and a calculated display of loyalty to the one-eyed god. For Ilnival is not interested in remembering past victories, but plotting new ones to come. The most sacred celebration of the year is held annually at Greengrass, when Ilnival's clerics assemble hordes of Orc warriors to swoop down on civilized lands in an orgy of destruction and violence. It is through this battle that the Orc males gain standing and position in their society. So, war is as much a means to a life of meaning and purpose to an Orc as it is a vital means to gather resources for the survival of the tribe. An Orc warrior can tell where they got every scar. They can spend long hours around community fire pits telling tales of their combats and kills. When a young Orc can talk about the battles for more than a whole night, he is a warrior of worth, one to be respected in the tribe. Those who have not experienced the fullness of war will find no welcome when the warriors plan their next raid. They are likely to get a good beating for trying to join in on the conversation. While the tenets of Grimms relate to the rules of all Orc people, the teaching of Ilnival defined the rites and ceremonies of war, and informed the elders of when a young blood is ready to make some decisions and take some leadership in the tribe. The rituals of Ilnival are as much about mental strength as they are about physical power. They involve torturous tests of endurance, the sort of thing you would imagine from a sensationalist and highly inaccurate movie about Shaolin monks. A typical ritual would be a period of exile for a young male Orc where they have to fend for themselves out in the wild and return wearing the pelt of a large predator they've killed. Cowardice is the greatest sin in the faith of Ilnival, with betrayal in the midst of battle being a very close second. Bagtru, the god of brute strength, is actually more of an Esarch, or demigod in many ways. The opposite of Ilnival, Bagtru is the son of Grimms, and also known as the Leg Breaker. Followers of him are very loyal to whoever the current chieftain of the tribe is, but they respect the right of only the strongest to rule the tribe. Any chieftain bested in a challenge of combat or strength, as far as the followers of Bagtru are concerned, is no longer the leader of the tribe. Clearly, you would think that this is the faith of the most dim-witted and muscle-bound thugs of the Orc people, and you would be pretty much correct. However, strength is so important to the Orcs that mothers will push and drive children of the tribe to be stronger, to eat and grow stronger, to help them carry water and rolls of skins, to gather firewood. They'll praise those who carry the most, who are the most enduring, who complain the least. From the very start of their lives, Orcs have it hammered into them that those they love the most, those that love the most, that strength and usefulness is the only value that they have, the only thing that is praised. Weak Orc children are not exactly left to die, but their inability to get a good meal, to get the best sleeping spot, to keep up, to be praised, to encouraged, will usually lead to sickness and death at an early age. Child mortality in the tribe not as high as one would expect, though, simply because the eons of hardship have produced a race that can survive on the smell of an oily rag. Bagtru's followers are ill-tempered to anything that exists outside the tribe. Even other Orc tribes are viewed as little more than competition and rivals. Bitter intertribal warfare is commonplace, and again has served to hone the Orc people into highly capable guerrilla warfare experts, constantly prepared, ever vigilant from attack from any quarter, even people who used to be their allies. The only place an Orc feels truly safe is within the tribe, where they have earned their place and know their value. Shargas, god of darkness and night, stealth, thieves, and the undead. When you see the symbol of a skull over a blood-red crescent or sickle moon, be very wary. I'll relate a little tale of my personal experience with a shaman of Shargas. We were adventuring out into Orc country, trying to ambush a particular Orc as we had a bounty to collect on him. We came across a shaman living by himself in a well-established camp and decided to strong-arm this old Orc for information and cooperation in ambushing our target. The Orc led us to an old grave barrow and down into a chamber, assuring us that this was the spot to wait for our bounty, as they came here often. Well, what followed was the most epic fight against a seemingly endless horde of skeletons I have ever faced in my entire gaming life. We lost count, but we destroyed over 40 skeletons, and those things were fierce, actually empowered by the necromancy of the very Orc we foolishly brought down there with us. It was only when we were fully occupied in a life or death battle with the undead swarm that we thought it might have been a good idea to just kill the shaman, but by then it was too late. In the end, the characters lived barely, and I learned a valuable lesson about Orc subterfuge. Shargas priests conduct rituals on the new moon, the blackest nights, where they sacrifice stolen items to their god in silence. It is quite spooky behaviour to witness, particularly amongst the rather ferocious Orcs. Their sacred animal is the bat, and within the tribe, priests of Shargus are tasked with the duty of culling the weak. A blade in the night is sometimes a welcome relief for an orc suffering from terrible wounds and disease. It can mean the quick end to a deformed child. It can be an assassination of a known traitor, or even, in rare cases, a strong leader who is clearly insane and a great danger to the tribe. The dictates of Shargus call on the faithful to make safe the darkness, to go down into the deep places and put to death all enemies, to strike at the heart of the sun-loving surface dwellers as they sleep under the blanket of night. Shargus dwells in an immense, eternally lightless cavern deep beneath Gehenna, so lives apart from the rest of the Orcish pantheon, who nomadically move from the realm of Nishrek whenever there's any sort of reordering of the cosmos by Ao. Nishrek has existed for a very long time within the void plane of Archeron, where it is drifted as a moon-sized cube, each side embroiled in constant warfare, with all rising again and again to battle under the favourable ire of Grimms. The whole plane is a mixture of all environments. All are relatively harsh, and each place is touched by war. The landscape is one of endless forts, trenches, barriers, battlefields, and strategic points, hotly contested by the teeming hordes of orcs, all divided into tribal factions. Despite what you may think of the place, they absolutely love it. This is Orc Valhalla. Shargus' realm of endless, peaceful darkness is quite a contrast to it, but it is filled with the treasures given freely to their god, and the orc petitioners who dwell there after death are the only ones who can actually see this beautiful realm, or their god. Actually, to any non-orc, they may as well have no eyes at all. It is because the darkness is impenetrable and eternal. Urtrus, a feared god of death and disease, usually silent and uncaring for the pleas of mortal orcs who are praying to save those they love or dying of illness themselves. Urtrus appears as an orc covered in foul disease and infested with maggots, but with creepy hands, perfectly healthy, but bone white. Urtrus is not a god who is loved, he is a god who is feared, and his clergy gain influence out of the fear others have of the power and out of respect for their special role in times of disaster. Priests of Urtrus handle the bodies of those who die of disease. They pray at dusk to regain their spells and ward off disease outbreaks, particularly after battles, when many orcs lie with seeping wounds in squalid conditions, unable to take care of hygiene for themselves. The priests also have the authority to forbid the eating of any meat they deem sacred to Urtrus, because it's rotted past the point of safety. They also taste water, sniff wounds, and maintain a vigilant watch for contagions. Despite the care of the tribe, priests of Urtrus are very, very dangerous to all other races. They firmly believe that death is inevitable and disease is a sacred gift given to them by Urtrus to spread piously among the unfaithful. They have two major holy ceremonies, one called the Ceremony of Contagion on Midsummer Eve, where they make a lot of particularly bloody sacrifices to protect the tribe as Urtrus begins to drain life from the world, the coming of winter. During winter, they are tasked with going on sacred pilgrimages to poison wells, infest livestock in barns, and stab people of other races with their long, potently filthy nails, that they grow long and daub in a special red paste made from the rotted blood of their sacrifices. The second holy day is Midwinter Eve, known as the Putrescent Death, marked by the sacrifices of intelligent creatures from other races, particularly elves and Eladrin, those who dare to be immune to the blessings of Urtrus. It is this shared pantheon of gods that unites the orc species, but what many do not fully realize is that, on the world of Toril at least, is that the orc species has many different races and some very different history behind them. What is known is that no orc race is truly native to Toril. They came from another world long ago, via transport by their gods or by magical portals opened to their world, their homeworld. When the Dawn War wound down, after Dentar had entered the Blue Age by swallowing the sun, turning the world of Toril into a ball of ice, there was the age of the first races, the creator races. The various deities that seemingly seeded the mortals who would worship them and provide them with the power of belief. Orcs contend that there was a bit of collusion between the gods of the civilized races in order to ensure the orc pantheon was excluded as much as possible, and as a result, a deadly fight broke out between Grimms and Corel and Lorathian. It should be noted that this may have been a general fear of the murderous power of Grimms and a threat that he posed to the other gods, which is not, as it turned out, an unwarranted concern. In the year -1071 DR, Grimms battled and killed Ray, the leader of the Mulhorandi pantheon, during the fury of the Orc-Gate Wars. This was the first recorded instance of one god of Toril killing another. Perhaps the other gods had concern that Grimms has the potential to dominate them all, if he gains sufficient power by worship. After all, the ancient times were brutal, and primitive people would have been attracted to a deity such as Grimms, so he could have quickly gained worship of all of the primitive races. The Orc pantheon was denied the lush lands and opportunities of the civilized races, and as far as Grimms saw it, and does to this day, the mortal orcs are fully within their rights to take whatever they want from the world. They earned their right to be there, just as much as any other mortal race. In many ways, the orc take pride in their ability to not only survive, but thrive in conditions which would kill a weaker people. They believe they truly understand what it means to come together in adversity and war, that the soft luxuries of civilization only weaken and corrupt the purity of raw strength, that they are as true to how they were created by their gods today as they ever were, and far better off for it. Civilization is weakness, corruption, and basically profane to orcs. So where did the orcs come from and when? In the conflicts of the very first empires of the scaly kind, avians and amphibians and the like, magic was used almost without any checks or balances. Great and terrible works of sorcery were done, including the opening of portals to other worlds. Whether by the cunning manipulation of the Orc pantheons or not, the location of the Orc Homeworld was discovered, and there were most likely a few instances when, to turn the tide of battle, the savage race was brought to the world of Toril as either a slave or mercenary force. And as is the nature of the orcs, they did fight, and then they scattered into the desolate wild. The first orcs of Toril were what we now call the Mountain Orc, summoned to locations in the spine of the world, which have been their home for eons. Mountain Orcs are more savage and brutal in appearance and demeanour. They form the general impression of what an orc is, as far as most people were concerned. They are the common race of orcs. Later in history, there was another great portal opened on the border of the great human empire of Ilmaska, in the east of Faerun. It is the land that would become known as Thay. A wizard used the ancient knowledge of the last Ilmaskari wizards to open a gate to the Orc Homeworld, and 5 years later, a great horde of grey orcs entered Toril, forming another distinctive racial group. From these two races, the other, rarer sub-races of Thayan Orcs, Orogs, Tanaraks, Ogrins, Ondontes, Boogans, and Half-Orcs are descended. Orcs vary in appearance, based on their region and sub-race, but all share certain physical qualities. Orcs of all kinds usually have greyish skin, coarse hair and stooped postures, low foreheads, large muscular bodies, snouted faces that feature lower canines that resemble boar tusks. Many also have wolf-like ears that are pointed at the ends, similar to an elf. Orcs are roughly the same size as humans, rarely much smaller, and often quite a lot bigger. A mountain orc is quite obviously a monstrous creature to most of the civilized folk of Faerun. Mountain orcs look vaguely like primitive humans, but a fair bit taller, or at 7 feet or more in height. A rare few even exceed 8 feet in height. They are stocky, they have powerful necks, and their bestial heads seem to sit directly on their massive shoulders. Their eyes are always a deep shade of red, and their faces are dominated by their pig-like snouts and large tusks. Mountain orcs often weave braids and tiny bones into their thick matted hair, which is usually black. Their clothing is a crude and primitive mismatch, often composed of unpleasant colours like blood red, mustard yellow, yellow-green, and deep purple. They are far from the cleanest race in Faerun and delight in decorating their bodies with scars and war paint. One key difference between the mountain and grey orcs, culturally, is that mountain orcs are not nomadic. They form settlements and gather in sometimes very large tribes. It is this fact that has been used by Obold Many-Arrows in relatively recent history, he who has been blessed by Grimms, to form a united kingdom of orcs in the spine of the world, ushering in a relatively stable and peaceful era. For how long, who knows? The largest concentration of mountain orcs are around all regions of the north, Luarar and the Silver Marches. The Grey Orcs can be found around the Moon Sea and through the Hordelands and the Old Empires. Understandably, they have zero tolerance for the rampant bigotry directed at them from the civilized races of the Sword Coast, who commonly lump all orcs into the same boat. Grey Orcs are more civilized. They're also nomadic, living a lifestyle more akin to the ancient hunter-gatherer past of the humans in the days of Thunder. They have much less prominent tusks, more lupine ears. Their skin is more of a mottled grey with lighter and darker patches. They have a more insightful, reclusive, spiritual and well-organised mentality within their tribe. They tend to take care of their own needs and only raid as part of religious rites when they have fallen on unforeseen times of disaster and where they have been left with no other option or risk starvation. Although they are far less prone to the berserk fits of rage, they are not civilized and are just as capable of killing and eating other humanoids. If that is the best option for the tribe. In some ways, getting ritually prepared, tortured, and murdered by Grey Orcs is even worse, since they do so deliberately and often more slowly as part of a religious ceremony in honour of their gods, which would probably be fascinating if it was not also agonising and fatal. So, orcs breed fast. They live short lives compared to most other races. They are considered adults anywhere between 11 and 14 years of age. They are considered middle-aged at 17, old at 23, venerable at 35 years of age. The average orc seldom lives longer than 40 years. Even if it manages to avoid violent death, it is unheard of for an orc to live longer than 45 without magical aid. Now let that sink in for a moment. They are considered old at 23 years. Orcs would have no society at all if they relied on the same methods of education that other races do. They have daily rituals, superstitions, chants, strictly enforced customs, rites of passage, and a religion intimately connected to their tribal life. From the moment an orc is born, they are indoctrinated into the orc way of life, and it is strength that gets them ahead in life, not just experience. Within their tribe, their religion, and the power of oral traditions, orcs, without it, they'd be little better than goblins. So, in a similar way that nursery rhymes carry messages through the ages for humans, orc oral tradition forms the backbone of their education. Actually, in earlier editions of D&D, orcs were a subtype of goblinoid, but we'll ignore that. The orcs take a lot from other races, not just food and equipment, but also magical knowledge and written language. They have their own spoken language and thousands of unique dialects, but sometimes write in a simple version of the dwarven runes. Magic is difficult for them to master, so those that do basically devote their entire life to it. Covering the individual customs and symbology of the orc tribes would be a lifetime's work for any sage, but I can talk about what is typical as something of a guide. Orc tribes identify strongly through a unified symbol, such as a clawed red hand, a white skull with huge tusks, an axe cleaving a skull, a broken thigh bone. They decorate banners and the sides of tents. They wear it as war paint, tattoo it on their skin, and brand it into themselves, as orcs generally view scars as attractive. They have a lot of rituals and rites of passage that mark their skin permanently as a sign of status. Orcs are creatures of raw emotion and action. They have poor temperaments. They're very easy to offend, and they respond to most problems in their way with violence. This is terrible for diplomacy and interaction with other races, but pretty good overall for their survival in the wild. Traditional orcish culture is extremely warlike, and when not at war, the race is usually planning for it. Most orcs approach life with the belief that to survive, one must subjugate potential enemies and control as much resources as possible. Male orcs dominate most orcish societies, and females are usually, at best, prized possessions, and little better than livestock at worst. Male orcs pride themselves about the number of wives and sons they have. Orcs would perhaps keep slaves, but they're not prone to keeping them alive long enough. Orcs don't build cities. They occupy territory that others have built and improve their fortifications, or operate out of small camps and dens within these places, often in natural caves or inside the largest, strongest structure in whatever town or fortress they've overrun. Orcs can manage ironwork on their own, as well as stonework, though their tools are inferior to those of more disciplined races. They get involved in gusto, so if it fits, then it's fine. So they'll strap things together. Anybody who's played Warhammer is more than aware of, The orc engineering is on display quite often. It's large, it's bulky, it's brutal, it's wrought iron and hammered in pegs, and it's got spikes. I'll get into the various subraces and crossbreeds of orcs on Toril, but first a word on the multiplanar status of this race, spread across the D&D universe, the cosmos. Orcs appear in nearly all published Dungeons & Dragons settings. There is some controversy regarding orcs in Dragonlance. The first edition AD&D Dragonlance Adventures hardbound rulebook states that orcs do not exist in Krynn, with ogres and minotaurs basically replacing their typical role, their niche. Second and third edition Dragonlance supplements also remove orcs from the world of Krynn. The main confusion on the subject has occurred. There was a published book by Mary Kirchhoff called Kendamore, where one of the main characters is a half-orc. This has occurred with other iconic races in Dungeons & Dragons, such as Drow, which are not native to the Dragonlance setting. Some suggest that the presence of orcs in Dragonlance can be explained through planar or space travel, as Krynn is connected to other Dungeons & Dragons worlds where orcs exist through Planescape and Spelljammer. So it's just, they're just there. Rare. They don't have a huge settlement or anything. In the Eberron campaign setting, it's much more detailed. Orcs are portrayed in a more positive light. Given to spirituality and nature worship, they establish successful societies, learning druidic secrets from the green dragon Varak, while the goblinoid races built a mighty empire some 16,000 years ago. The Orcish societies took a massive blow during the Dalkir invasion 9,000 years ago, though it was the Orcs, now known as the Gatekeepers, who were able to stop the invasion by sealing the Dalkir beneath Eberron and severing the link between Eberron and the Dalkir home plane of Zorat. The Gatekeeper Druidic sect remains a presence in Eberron, albeit one largely concerned with defending the world from outsiders, aberrations, and other unnatural foes, rather than politics. In the world of Greyhawk, orcs called Eros in the Flan language can be found in almost all locales in the Flaness, but are most heavily concentrated in the Pomards in the Empire of Auz, the Bone March and North Kingdom. They're also known to exist a great orcish city known as Garel Inkdal in the Griff Mountains. The orcs of Backlanish nation of Zeef are very rare, very different from their brethren, having very nearly been assimilated into human society, though they're still regarded as a lower class. In the world of Mystara, orcs are prevalent in both the known world, the Savage Coast, and the Hollow World. The article Orcs of Thar details their culture, which is more about the orc-dominated broken lands southeast of Galantry. Orcs in Spelljammer are represented by a version of orc called the Skro, or orcs, spelled backward. Unlike the typical orcs featured in Dungeons & Dragons, the Skro are sophisticated and disciplined with a strong, well-organised martial culture. So, not quite Nilbold. Orcs and D20 systems follow the precedents set in the earliest Dungeons & Dragons materials. Many D20 system publishers have retained the orcs in their works, since they're so iconic, while many of their publishers have examined orcs in greater detail than was the norm in earlier works. Most of these have not reinvented the race as such. Still tends to be identified with coarseness, orkiness. Such products include Bad Axe Games' Heroes of High Favour, Half-Orcs and Skirmishers published Orcs of the Triple Death line of miniatures, as well as Pathfinder's role-playing game by Paizo Publishing. Of course, shout out to all of you stalwart Pathfinder players out there. Okay, on to subraces. An Orc is a crossbreed between a male orc and a female ogre. Orogs typically, they usually live among orcs, and they are stronger, more intelligent, more highly disciplined than typical orcs. So they form the upper echelon of orc society most often. In the Forgotten Realms, Orogs were an orc tribe who became cut off from the mountain home after a great attack into the civilized world. They were basically cut off from retreat. They eventually found a way into the Underdark and hid away from the elven and human enemies. They remained in the Underdark for thousands of years, fighting denizens of that terrible realm all the time. Eventually they became a superior in strength and personality to normal mountain orcs, with many hidden groups still dwelling deep below the surface world. Actually, there are some related subbreeds of Orogs as well. Variants on the Orog include the Neo-orog and the Ogrelin. The Neo-orog is a specific orc-ogre crossbreed created by the Red Wizards of Thay to be used as elite soldiers. The Ogrelin is the brutish armor-skinned offspring of a female orc and a male ogre. I should mention this is an engineered breeding. Normally female orcs are very well protected by the tribe and thus out of the ordinary breeding is vanishingly rare. The Lossel is an orc baboon mage-bred crossbreed created by O's and the Scarlet Brotherhood in the Greyhawk setting. Though roughly humanoid, they are very little more than tool-using animals in many respects. The name Lossel means lost ones. They are a crossbreed between orc and the northern forest thick-furred Boromandril, so basically baboons. They live for 25 years or so, mature at the age of 3, and have limited 10-foot dark vision and I could do a more detailed ecology video on them later. They're very typical of a primitive species and a great template for that sort of niche. The crossbreeding of orcs and humans results in half-orc. These will be getting their own video and are considered by most, particularly in the east of Aeron, to be a distinct race of intelligent humanoids with their own culture, history, and customs. Speaking of the east, there are 2 breeds of Thayan orc. They're magical hybrids of ordinary grey orcs, orogs, and other creatures, including possibly ogres and gnolls. Tall and muscular, with large hooded eyes, tough leathery skin, and snouted bestial faces. Thayan orcs seem to embody all the worst aspects of the creatures that went into their creation. Thayan black orcs were bred to act as scouts, archers, and infiltrators. They're quicker, leaner, and slightly taller than Thayan red orcs, and their skin ranges from dark green to deep sooty black. Their facial features are slightly less bestial, and their eyes are smaller and completely black. Thayan red orcs were bred as elite shock troops. They're tougher than Thayan blacks, and their skin is darker mottled red, and their eyes are deep yellow. They're usually well equipped and revel in bloodshed and violence. Both Thayan black and red orcs are warrior creatures, loyal and skillful, who live for battle. Their only weakness is their slow rate of reproduction. Many are infertile. No independent colonies of these creatures, these subraces, exist outside of their barracks run by the Thayans, which keep them tightly controlled with an extremely lawful hierarchical structure to curb their naturally chaotic natures. In the lands north of the Ride, in a secluded part of the Tortured Land, dwell an unusual subrace of orcs called the Odontis. I think they are one of the most interesting because they are almost the polar opposite of Mountain Orcs. They're a subrace mainly due to the long period of isolation and their different culture, very different culture. Odontes they revere Eldath, the goddess of peace and quiet places, and their culture attempts to embody the pacifist teaching of Eldath. Odonte royal oral history recounts that the founders brought 30 young Odonte orcs to the lands they still consider theirs long ago, and laid down the teachings that provide the foundation of Odonte society in a cycle of tales called the Terek Pasar, or the Way of Peace. One sage has theorized that the original Odontes were in fact infant grey orc orphans brought from their lands and taught by a reclusive group of priests of Eldath. This is quite correct, though the full details are lost to history. That they were raised in the faith of the Green Goddess by the people of Myth Ondath and left to their own devices when that city was destroyed. Sadly, the 15 tribes of Odontes were discovered by a scouting party from Zenthal Keep in 1340 DR. Because Odontes lived by peaceful and collaborative philosophy, they were not prepared for the treachery of the Zents. And shortly after the initial meeting between Zents and Odontes, the majority of the Odonte population, with the exception of one isolated tribe out of the 15, was betrayed by the Zents and kidnapped into slavery. The last tribe was, however, under the divine protection of Eldath herself. In Volo's Guide to Monsters, you have the option to play an orc as a character. An Odonte orc is a perfect candidate. Odonte's warriors are skilled in the use of the greatsword, prefer studded leather armor, and the use of the bark skin spell. They live for up to 60 years on average, and you can have great fun role-playing them as quoting the holy Zen-like wisdom of the Way of Peace to your adventuring companions. Perhaps they strive to free themselves from the carnivorous diet in a quest to find a suitable vegan alternative. They may utter such pearls of wisdom as, "What the meaning of a mountain? To the cloud that runs from its peak. What is the cloud to the raindrops who fall from its belly? What is the mountain to the tree that drinks of its rain?" While they sip a hot cup of tea sitting next to a campfire and sadly roast a chicken. On the opposite side of the spectrum, the Tanarix originated as orc demon crossbreeds in the region known as Hell's Gate Keep. They are short, stocky orcs with bristly hair, and you can spot them pretty quickly by the horns or bony ridges that run along the sides of their heads. They also have a telltale stink of brimstone wafting off them, and have a limited supernatural ability to manipulate fire, leading to many of them becoming sorcerers, actually. While they are smarter than an average orc, they are chaotic evil to the core, and their demonic blood drives them to fits of senseless destruction, making them hard for other creatures to deal with, except they frequently fall into the role of thug in service to cambions and other fiendish creatures. And finally, the Boogan is often encountered in the upper reaches of the Underdark, where Orc and Quaggoth populations live in close proximity. They look more like Quaggoths than Orcs, covered in greyish-white shading to black, thick fur, standing 6.5 feet tall. They're primitive, but less savage than a Quaggoth, but more savage than an Orc. And they're leaner and have less fur on their face. They have that distinctive tusked jaw of the Orc. Gangs of Boogans have been encountered along the spine of the world, which lies above the largest population of Quaggoths found in the realms. Mixed tribe of Orcs, Quaggoths, and Boogans are found beneath Trollmoors, where Orc tribes have interbred with Quaggoth clans in an effort to combat races that target them for slavery. No doubt you have many questions and a desire for more detail on the Orc subraces, Orc player character options, and I'm only too happy to expand on these topics in subsequent videos. But for now, I will have to leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed the exploration of the Orc species, and I look forward to a detailed delve into the life of half-orcs. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll catch you again soon.